then I would have many bones to pick with him. But of course, I don't believe there is such a thing. But the argument from evil, as it's known, is a very old one, and it goes back through medieval religious figures as well as later humanists. That this idea that it is very hard to square this loving God who has knowledge of every hair on our head and adores us and adores little kittens, but he also, as I say, bone cancer in children, but also life cycles of insects whose whole aim is to burrow into the eyes of children in Africa and lay their eggs there and cause blindness for those children. I mean, you could quite easily picture a universe in which there weren't such an animal, and in which children were not sent blind with pain and horror by the various bugs and fungi and insects and viruses in the world. It isn't necessary.
There's a worm in Africa that burrows under the skin, and it's a long worm. And if you can pull it out with a pencil and wrap it, but it breaks, it's fragile, and then it gets infected. It's a terrible thing. And a doctor recently made it his life's work to eradicate that and did it successfully. Yeah. And so then I read what you wrote, and I take it very seriously. And I wasn't throwing it in your face. No. I brought it up actually because of what you said about Flaubert's attitude. Because what your statement lacks is exactly what Flaubert highlighted in that woman on her knees. And I'm not saying this is a simple solution, right? And I would say, so let's take the argument you made there. And there's a direction that goes in that's nihilistic and resentful and vengeful and angry and all understandable. Yes. But to me, it doesn't look to me like there's anything good in it. It looks like it's entirely counterproductive. It makes the problem it purports to have been generated by worse. Mm-hmm. So then the question is, what's the appropriate attitude given that the argument you make is actually an extraordinarily powerful argument? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know, I think that resentment and anger, and even the motive that would make you want to say that to God himself, I think that's probably not helpful, even though it's so, well, I came to that with great difficulty. I mean, I've had my reasons to be resentful and angry, especially recently, and because I'm suffering a lot of pain. Yeah. And it makes me resentful and angry and wanting to shake my fist. Yeah. But I found upon intense consideration that there was nothing in that didn't make it worse, and that therefore that must be wrong, even though it's justifiable, right?
Jordan, I completely understand. And you must remember that my response was to a question I didn't see coming, and it was amused. It was because I don't believe in this God. It's not an issue. I'm not really resentful and angry about the fact that there's evil in the world. I'm sorrowful very often, and I'm united in my admiration for the fact and the real belief I have that most people, fundamentally, given this dysfunction or this deep trauma, most people are so good, are so anxious to be good, are deontically good, have a sense of obligation and drive in them to be better than they are. I think that's one of the key things that I love about humanity, is not just that we are dissatisfied with things that are wrong and can be improved, but that with ourselves we are dissatisfied, and that most of us want to be better. I know that's true of me all the time. Every time I go off to sleep, I think, how did I screw up today? How can I be better tomorrow? Why am I so bad at this? If only I could manage that. In moral terms, genuine moral terms.
I think that's an extraordinarily common experience and very much under-noticed. Yeah. And part of the reason, as far as I can tell, that the talks that I've been giving, let's say, have had the effect that they've had is because I do point out that that's an extraordinarily common experience. Yeah. That self-torture by conscience, and it does indicate this striving towards a higher mode of being. The other question I have when I look at the response that I just read is that the amount of the world's evil that's a consequence of our voluntary moral insufficiencies is indeterminate. So you might say, hypothetically speaking, that as part of God's creation, we actually have important work to do. And if we shirk it, the consequences are real. Yeah. And you might say, well, that's just an apology for God. And perhaps that's the case. And perhaps there's no God at all. And so what the hell are we talking about? But I do think it's an important issue. I mean, your life is characterized by a stellar level of constant productive creativity. That's you, and you're offering that to the world, and that seems necessary. And maybe it's because the problems are real and important, and the role we have to play ethically is of paramount importance, truly.
Yeah.
Why else would we torture ourselves with conscience? And